Welcome to this episode of Unstoppable Journeys. My name is Ryan Gubick, founder and personal CFO of MRG Wealth, and I'd like to introduce you to a special guest we have today, Chris McPhee, professional EOS Implementer.
Correct, yes.
And what does EOS stand for, Chris?
EOS stands for the Entrepreneurial Operating System. And it's something I kind of came across partway through my career, and it was simple, practical tools to help entrepreneurial companies, of which I was a president of one at the time, and needed a bit of structure around that. So, we'll get into it a little bit later, but then ultimately, when the company was sold, decided that was something that I wanted to really lean into, and became an EOS, Entrepreneurial Operating System implementer to help other companies.
Very cool. So looking forward to hearing all about what a EOS implementer is and the problems we solve. And maybe we start at that. You know, we were talking at a networking function a couple months back, and it was really interesting, kind of your story you've had and the people you help and how you help them. So I'd love to maybe, start off with the problem. So what is the problem you help people solve?
It's really around helping entrepreneurial leadership teams generally get more of what they want from their business. And I say it more broadly than that because a lot of people will say they want growth, but really what they want is they want to get a grip on their business. They want to be able to maybe spend less time working in their business and more time on other passions they might have. And so really at its essence, it's an ability to help an entrepreneurial leadership team get aligned on their vision, because often that leader has the vision, just not out of their head and shared. Get aligned on that vision, and then also to have accountability and discipline so that they can achieve that vision. So a lot of times I find entrepreneurs, sheer force of will, they build their company, they've got a lot of energy and enthusiasm, and it just almost becomes overwhelming at some point. And they don't want to be burdened with a whole bunch of bureaucracy and rules, but they need just enough structure and system. So that's the accountability and discipline part of it. We call it traction. And then
there's a book called Traction.
There's a book called Traction, exactly. That's our reference material. It was interesting. Gino Wickman, the founder of EOS, he started this system helping entrepreneurs, and he honestly thought that he was the only one who could do it. And he was actually challenged by a friend of his saying, I think I can reproduce those results. You've got a system here. And he said, yeah, you go for it and see if you can do it. And sure enough, was able to follow that through. So then that resulted in the book Traction, which is now what I teach other entrepreneurs about. And then the third part of it was something often that's lacking, but not obviously why it's lacking. And we call it health generally. And it's just around a cohesive, functional leadership team that maybe spends a lot of time focused on, say, strategy and working in the business, but not enough time working to build a healthy leadership team that can actually have open debate, constructive conflict, and get to a place where they're really all trusting one another on that team. And it seems very kind of fuzzy and fluffy, but it's so critical to how much entrepreneurial teams will see success or lack of it if they don't have a healthy team. So it really is that vision, traction, healthy combination that I help companies with, and this foundation of what EOS is.
That makes a lot of sense. And you mentioned, sometimes people spend too much time working in the business, and you didn't mention on the business, but it sounds like that kind of paradox of how much time and effort and energy you put in the business versus on the business.
Right.
And align that with your vision and health and all those other components you talked about.
Yeah, and it's a bit ironic in a way, because a lot of times, entrepreneurs will start their own business because they want freedom, right? They want freedom of time, freedom of money. They want to just do what they love, and they start off doing that, and then they actually get some success and start hiring a few more people, and the business grows, and before long it feels like business is running them rather than the other way around. So they're putting more and more time in the business. It might be financially successful. It's not that it isn't necessarily, but they don't feel like they have control, or they're not doing what they want to do in the business. And so that's where Gino Wickman, when he started off with EOS, just discovered that there was a lot of entrepreneurs, good people who built strong businesses, but then felt kind of stuck, and they didn't know how to free them up so that they could really focus on taking the business to the next level, because they were in the weeds, so to speak. They were always doing more and more and just getting caught up in the business and feeling like there's no real way out. They just have to work more and more in the business to, what one entrepreneur told me was like, he had to feed the beast. Like at one time he started the business, graphic designer, really loved it, working with his partner, got some projects, hired some more people, got some more projects, hired some more people. And really soon it's like all my time now is doing like sales and business development. And it's not that I don't like it at all, but I love doing the design, and I don't get to do that anymore.
It's moving away probably from the original vision.
Right, exactly. And what he really wanted to do is as a business owner, and that's so often people, they just kind of find themselves running businesses that are running them than the other way around, and working 60, 70 hours a week and just not getting what they originally wanted, which was more of that freedom of time, money, and being able to do what they wanted to do.
And it's interesting. There's so many parallels to that in the personal finance side. Like we support clients having an unstoppable journey. And it's very similar in terms of understanding what is your vision and values for what you want to do, and are you on track to accomplish that? And if not, what do you need to do? And we have a framework that we support them on. But I think with business or employees or personal lives, having that, I think there's a lot could be learned no matter what you do in life, to be able to live a fulfilled life and be happy with what you want.
Right.
And quite often there's detours and roadblocks along our journeys, and it's having people like yourself to help you and say, okay, if you're not where you want to be, here's some things to look at.
Right.
So, can you share with us a bit about your story? Like, I know you have a very successful business background and you have some really exciting stories, but, why did you want to solve this problem for people? What made you wake up one day and want to be a professional EOS implementer?
Yeah. Well, I think, like a lot of people, I didn't foresee myself being here at this part of my career. I started off, well, actually way back, grew up in a family that was pretty entrepreneurial. So we owned the local newspaper when newspapers were a thing, local furniture store. So I grew up in those businesses. Father was very entrepreneurial, and I developed a bit of an entrepreneurial spirit, but I didn't really take advantage of that early in my career. So I worked for big companies and enjoyed the work, but just felt like I didn't have that personal impact on the business that I desired. And so I quit and started my own consulting company. And right away after that, pretty quickly, I met a visionary entrepreneur who just had these big dreams and a great software business that I resonated with. And so I went there to run the day-to-day operations, and we had some really good growth, but all sorts of growing pains along the way. And I didn't expect it, because I'd worked for big companies, and I thought, a small company is just a small, big company, and it's not at all. Very different kinds of environments and different kind of systems work. And what I was trying to do when we started to see some growing pains, like revolving door of talent, not being able to find and keep the right people, like seeing some issues with our quality as we got bigger. I kept bringing in things that had worked for big companies, and it was just too much. It was too much structure, too much system, too much process. And so I'd stumbled across that book, Traction, and thought, this is so simple, and yet it seems like it's just enough that we need for our business. And so put that system in place, and it was the right fit. It was not burdensome, but we still needed enough structure. We were around 15, 20 people or so at the time. So still in that growth phase, but in a stage where we needed to put a bit more structure in place. And so it was really effective. It helped us get the company to the next level. I successfully sold it. And after I'd worked with the acquiring company for a little while, the acquiring company then got acquired by another company, and all of a sudden it was a big company again. But I'd really had this taste for an entrepreneurial type of energy and business. And at the same time, it was really challenging when you were in the middle of it. Really frustrating to feel like this should be easier than it is, and it's not. And I'm trying a bunch of stuff, and it doesn't seem to be helping.
Does that resonate with a lot of your clients right now? Like you kind of were in the
does.
bottle before yourself and figured out how to get yourself out of it?
Well, that's exactly it. You don't have that perspective because you've grown the company, and you got it to that certain stage often by just sheer force of will, like saying yes, helping your customers, providing with the product or the service that they need. And then all of a sudden you hit a bit of a ceiling and realize that you can't do it all yourself. You're going to burn out. But you're also struggling because you're trying to change a tire on a moving bus kind of thing, right? Like you're trying to keep the company going, but also put that just enough structure in so that you can grow it, scale it, but also not kill it at the same time. And a lot of the entrepreneurs that I work with, they're struggling with that balance, right? Like we don't want to create this kind of robotic machine, this corporate infrastructure, because that's not who we are. We're entrepreneurial, we're nimble, we're fast moving, but at the same time, it doesn't feel like we've got enough structure right now. And so a lot of the conversations around well, how do we just create that just enough clarity, that just enough structure around making sure we're aligned on our vision. We've got the basic tools and systems in place for accountability and discipline, but not so much that we are kind of overwhelmed and we've got all this paperwork and process and it feels like we're just doing it to follow process as opposed to doing it with an end in mind. And so it's a messy time of transition as you're working through that. But I do find once that structure can be put in place, it's not an overnight thing. It's typically around a 2-year journey to go through this. But once it is in place, then the company really can take that next level and really focus on that growing to the next stage of development. And it's really exciting time to see that growth and progression in that leadership team as that owner, entrepreneur, founder starts to let go of the vine a little bit, starts to be able to be more confident in that leadership team, help them in terms of their kind of that visionary role and that spark and that leadership, but not having to be hands-on with everything all the time. And once you can make that transition, that's where I find, the company can go in a number of different ways. So sometimes that owner has gotten to the point now where they can kind of work 4 hours a week in the business and it runs itself. And they love that. And they go on vacations and that's great. Other times I've worked with business leaders who just love starting businesses. So they get the business going. It's going great. The leadership's doing really well. And they go off and start another business because that's what they're great at. And
the important part is they get to do what they want, though.
They get to do what they want.
Enabled.
Or they just get reignited in the business. I was working with one entrepreneur pretty recently, and we'd spent a few sessions together, and he said, you know what, I was kind of coasting on my way out. The reason I started this is because I thought, well, I need to get the leadership team up and running so I can step away from the business and then, put on my slippers and go into retirement. And he said, the opposite's happened. Like now I'm actually really excited about this because I got reminded of, why we started this business in the first place, and I was excited, the passion. And I realized that had just kind of been suppressed because it felt like a job. It felt like I was just, feeding the beast, right?
Yeah.
In terms of getting into it. And so those kind of, you asked why I do what I do. It's those kind of moments, right? Where you see that light come on. It's like, oh, this doesn't have to feel like work. Like I didn't start this because I wanted to get myself a job. I started this because I wanted to build something. I wanted to, I was excited about my customers. I was excited about what I had to offer, and over time, it just felt like it was heavy. And so it's a great transition where you can start to see that weight come off their shoulders a little bit and realize that they don't have to be shouldering all of the burden. They still want to be part of it for the most part, but they just want to be able to have a team they can work with and trust and build that organization so that they have some options. Maybe they want to sell it, maybe they want to keep running it, maybe they want to hand it over to their family as that transition takes place. But it gives them those options where before they just feel like my options, I either keep doing this until I keel over or just sell it and get this all off my plate. And so this is an option for them to actually get it to a stage where they can choose what happens rather than just having it happen to them.
Yeah, it sounds like it helps make their journey easier.
That's right. That's right. And you'd asked about, why I do what I do, and it's no two journeys are the same, right? And just as you just
Isn't that the
as
truth?
well, right? It's about helping get that clarity. I was talking to another EOS Implementor, and he says, I think our main job is just to help people see, help them get on the same page, help them create that sense of clarity that they all share with the leadership team. And just that alone does so much for them because they've spent so much time maybe in their own head or just hands-on in the business, and they've not taken that time to really float above the business, get that perspective.
Going back to that vision.
What they actually want, right?
Yeah.
And they kind of knew what they wanted and went by gut feel. I was working with a company not too long ago, and he said, we're just two good hands-on technicians. We started this business, and all of a sudden we got 50 employees, and it's great. But really, I don't know what happened, kind of thing. It's funny when you hear those kind of things. You think that, like we said, so much is is planned, but so much is not planned.
Yeah, an intentional journey versus an unintentional journey. And how do you get
Exactly.
that intention or reins back?
Yeah,
So
exactly.
can you share us a bit on the solution? So this EOS solution, you mentioned sometimes it could take 2 years for a business to turn around, and I really appreciate you talking about the challenges and problems, because I think that resonates with a lot of people, like whether it's business owners or the employees within it or other people. A lot of people have those detours on their journey,
Right.
and they're like, okay, I started here, now I'm over here. How did that happen? There's a blink.
Exactly.
So what does your solution look like, or your framework that you were mentioning to me earlier,
Yeah.
to help people get back on track?
Yeah, I think a framework is a good way to put it. And the whole thing is founded on the concept that there's really 6 key areas of a business that need to be equally strong. And we call them the 6 key components. And what we found is that entrepreneurial leadership teams, regardless of if they're doing really well or really poorly, they're all dealing with lots of issues at the same time. And we lovingly call them 136 issues, just because it's a lot.
They're firefighters, is their second job.
Exactly. And that doesn't go away. Like, it doesn't go away as the business gets bigger, but it does. We do find that most of them are symptoms of a root cause, and they're often rooted in one of these 6 key components. And so the journey that we help our clients on, this solution really is to strengthen these 6 key areas of their business. And at just a really high level, one is vision. We talked about that, getting on the same page, just clarity of where they're going, how they're going to get there. A second key component is people. So it's around getting the right people in the right seats. It's really about figuring out what makes a really great fit for their unique organization. 80% of the challenges are typically people challenges in an entrepreneurial business. And then there's data. Data is about using facts, figures, and objective information to get a pulse. And what we find is a lot of entrepreneurs, they just use their gut feel, and that gets them to a certain stage. But then at that stage, we want to make sure we're grounding that in facts and figures, so that we're making grounded decisions, but still using that intuition and gut feel.
And do you use goals and milestones to track against the data that you're collecting?
That's right,
to see
exactly.
if they're on track? Or
Yeah, and there's a couple of aspects around that. So one aspect is what we call these quarterly rocks. So we have a number of different kind of time frames that we look at. Way off 10 years, what's the singular goal that you want to achieve in 10 years' time? Then a 3-year picture, painting what that visual is. 1-year goals, breaking that down to quarterly, what we call rocks, quarterly priorities. But then also keeping them on track on a week-to-week basis is where that data component comes in. It's just a handful of numbers that give them a pulse of the business, making sure that they're doing the right things today to get what they want 3 months from now. And it helps to make sure that we're not kind of winging off in different directions. Then the 4th key component is what we talk about issues. So we talked about those 136 issues. And what we've learned is that entrepreneurial leadership teams will always deal with issues. There's no lack of issues. They just
put a couple out and new ones pop up.
Put them a couple out, new ones pop up. And our goal is to get them so that the same ones don't pop up over and over again. There was a quote by Jeff Bezos that I'd heard not too long ago. Whether you love him or hate him, you can't argue that he's seen some success. And he said, well, what was a key to success in Amazon? He said, we just picked the biggest, hardest problem that we needed to solve, and we solved it. And we did that over and over again. And that's what we find with entrepreneurial teams is a lot of times they're not solving the problems. They're kind of duct tape and bind twine and just kind of hoping they don't blow up. And so we teach is really a way to dig into the root of the issue and then take action so that issue goes away forever. You'll have new issues that come up, but if you can start to solve issues at the root, then you start to really progress the company. And so that's a critical aspect of the framework. And the 5th key component is process, which a lot of times I find entrepreneurs, they want to lean into right away. They want to systemize their business so they can franchise it or get it to that level where it can be scaled, which is great. And it's absolutely something that we focus on. We don't jump into it right away because a lot of times the process issues are actually people issues that hadn't been dealt with. And so we focus on the people part first, but we do get into that process side to get the most important things done the right and best way every time. And then last, the namesake of the book, Traction, is really about putting those systems in place. You're getting that accountability, that discipline, you're executing towards the vision. And so those 6 key components, we find if you can strengthen all 6 of them, and that's where the journey comes in. It's not an overnight thing, but if you can strengthen all 6 of them to what we call at least 80% or better, ideally 100%, but that's utopia. We're very much practical in this. Once we get to that 80% stronger, then you find the business is really humming along. Like you've got good balance in those. And what I've learned over time is that you always are desiring a bit of that shortcut. But this is really the equivalent of healthy diet and exercise, right? Like it's not a shortcut. You can go faster. And I always say, go as faster as you can go.
But you got to put the work in.
But you got to put the work in, and it's a system. You build these habits over time. And that's really then what makes the business successful, is that this system, this framework of strengthening these 6 key components is built into the company. It's not something that you just kind of put in place and hopefully it sticks, right? It's that consistent timing with it, and that's where my work with companies is we typically are working together around a 2-year time frame, and inevitably around that 6 months, it's like, oh, this is great, we're doing well. It's like, next quarter, you're going to struggle.
Yeah.
Because that's just kind of the way it goes. But then after that, we'll get back on track, and then it starts to stabilize over time, and that's where the organization can really start to get that ball rolling, is where you've got that systemized way of running the business, where that owner, founder, visionary doesn't have to be part of every decision anymore. They've got a trusted leadership team that feels that autonomy. They're the right people in the right seats, we call them. They know what they need to do to work the system, so to speak, and get the company to where they want it to be. And then the visionaries, that's often, once to get to that period, it's such a freeing time for them in the business, because now they've got all these different options. They can double down on the company, they can grow it to the next level if they wish, they can just be happy with what they've created and go off to Mexico for 6 months a year. It's great to see that, at that opportunity where they can make the choices that they've wanted to make for a long time.
Yeah, having the time, money, and control are 3 big components, I think, in everybody's life, right? And you get to choose. Once you unlock kind of the freedoms of those, like you mentioned, you have clients that double down on the business and want to do more, or start a new business, or go off to vacation.
Exactly.
But it's their control.
But it's their control.
And
it's
their choice.
Exactly, yes.
Do you have any examples that you can share with us of a client that you've worked with in the last little bit that's maybe, had some of these challenges that you're talking about, and how the solution you just shared with us helped them kind of evolve?
Sure. So one client I can think of, so I don't work with all software technology companies, but this one particular is a software technology company. And we had our first day together, and I remember the chief technology officer said, I don't know if this is going to work. It's pretty simple stuff. Like I've learned all about this before. And I said, well, give it a go, see how it goes. If it's not right for you, it's not right for you. That's why, don't try to push this on.
Give it a college try.
Give it a college try. And it was fascinating. About 4 months later, I got an email out of the blue from her, and she said, this is fantastic. Our meetings are a quarter of the time they used to be, and they're far more effective than they used to be. And it's a journey that we've continued to work together. And I think we're about a year in now or so. And at the last quarterly, so I meet with them once a quarter, once we're up and going, we always ask, do we have 100% right people in the right seats? Are they a great fit for our culture, and are they great at their jobs? And this was the first quarter that said yes. Everyone, right people, right seats. And you could see that sense of calm in the room. Once they could say yes to that, because of the other sessions that we'd had were very much talking about, well, so-and-so doesn't feel like they're the right fit. They're not exhibiting our core values. It's causing issues with our clients, or just don't feel like it's the right capacity for where they're on this particular seat. And so have a lot of conversations around that. But once we've gotten to that level, then all of a sudden there's so many opportunities that have now appeared. Well, now we can start to focus on this, and we can do this in this area. And
part of your focusing on the biggest problems first, right?
That's right, exactly.
People is often the biggest problem.
People is often the biggest issue, because if you don't have the right people, then you can't put the processes in place, because either they're not capable of doing it, or they're just not a right fit for the company and they push back against it. And it's not that they're wrong necessarily, they're just not right for your unique organization and culture.
And so they might not be happy either, right? It's
typically
free
not.
Experience for an employee and people to find their passions.
Well, that's it. And people don't want to feel like they're not successful in the workplace, in their job, and yet They maybe got promoted into, say, a sales manager role. A lot of times you see that. You get a great salesperson. It's like, you're great. You be the sales manager. You teach other salespeople how to do this. And they go into that role and that's not what they're good at. Like, they were great at selling and great with customers. You get into that sales manager role and they're not dealing with the customers anymore. They're dealing with, with salespeople, and they're frustrated because they're not being successful. The company's frustrated because they're not being successful. And a lot of times it's just acknowledging that's not the right seat for them. And we call that right people, wrong seat, where they're great fit for the company, but they're not great at their jobs. And companies grown up around them. A lot of times you see that in finance, where a great bookkeeper, company grows to 50 people, they need a chief financial officer. That's not what they're built for, right? They're built for the nuts and bolts of the bookkeeping. And so once you really bring that to light and have those open and honest conversations and get people into the seats that they were, put on the earth to do, then they love it, right? Then they're great at what they do and they're proud of the accomplishments that they can have with it. And so it's just almost having those conversations, because in an entrepreneurial company, I've done it myself, right? Like, it's like, oh, we need somebody to file our taxes. You're good with the numbers, right? You're in engineering. Yeah, you file the taxes. And so, they can do it. And pretty soon, you get into this area where we like to say careers go to die because you're good at it, but you don't like it.
Yeah.
But you keep doing it because you're good at it, and you need to because it's an entrepreneurial company and people wear many hats. And
there's a big difference between good enough, and
good
great.
Enough. That's exactly.
Great, and I find a lot of cases in life are that, is it good enough?
Yeah.
But do you want good enough in life?
Yeah, it is exactly.
Or do you want great?
And having those conversations, a lot of people, they just haven't had those open conversations with one another, and just providing that ability to have those discussions in a way that you don't feel like there's going to be some sort of pushback on you, or you can say these in a somewhat vulnerable way and have it be heard in the light in which it's desired.
And that's, I think, an important topic you just mentioned there. So is part of the solution that you developed mindset and behavior to welcome an open conversation where people can freely speak about their thoughts, their opinions, behavior, all those kind of things. Because that sometimes doesn't happen, I think, in business or in the workplace.
It's critical, and I start off every session, even with companies that have been working for a while, with what we call some of our healthy rules. And one of the healthy rules is to be comfortable with the uncomfortable. And the idea there is that if we're not being open and honest with one another, and we're not going deep enough, and it doesn't happen overnight, this isn't the first session typically, but over time we want to get to the point where people can honestly speak their minds, they can focus on what's best for the business. That was another area where I often say, if you're feeling like you're loggerheads, just ask yourselves, what's best for the business? This business is our baby, me, my founders, my leadership team. And if we get focused on what's best for me or best for you, that might not be best for the business. And when we can start having those conversations, then people can really open up and say, well, I think it's best for the business, actually, if don't run head of sales, because you're not a great manager. That's just not what you're fit for. I think you're really great at R&D. Like, that's what you're really built for. It's like, oh, I felt I had to do this because, that was what my dad did. And when he passed the company down to me, felt like that's what I had to do. And if you don't create that environment where people can be open and honest with one another, those kind of issues, they fester, right? They just sit under the surface. They prevent you from getting what you want, and yet you don't even know it because they're not out in the open. And more times than not, we'll get to the end of the day and get some feedback from the team, and almost always the owner of the company says, oh, I didn't even know about a lot of the issues that came up today. And we may have only solved a handful of them, but those are ones that often are the best days for that owner, that leadership team, is when they've just brought to light a lot of these issues that had been unspoken, or people were afraid to bring them up. And if you can't have those open and honest conversations, you end up getting stuck.
Yeah, you can't fix what you don't know exists.
You can't fix if you don't know it, exactly. Yeah. And that's also what we call one of our aspects of what a company needs to be a good fit for EOS, is that the leadership needs to be willing to be open, honest, and vulnerable with one another. Because you can absolutely run a company where the leader basically is kind of that dictator and they tell you what to do, and that can work just fine. That's not for companies that would run on EOS. So EOS is really for a leadership team that is willing to be, maybe not currently open, honest, and vulnerable with one another, but if they're willing to be open and honest and vulnerable with one another. And that's, I think, my main role. Like a lot of companies will self-implement EOS, we call it. They'll pick up the book and they'll run it through, and they can be very successful with that. Others, they just need that other voice of an implementer, facilitator, to help to create that environment where it's supported, willing to be open, honest, and vulnerable. And our goal as implementers is not to work ourselves further into the business. It's really to help them get up and running, help them build these healthy habits, and then get out of the way and let them run their own business. But anticipate that they'll continue to keep this system running, so to speak.
When you've seen, as you mentioned earlier, you've seen the cycles. And I think in one of the kind of examples you mentioned, your client was doing really well and thinking that they got it all, and say, hey, next quarter there might be a surprise. And being able to see that, with different industries and different clients over and over again. I think we all don't know what we don't know in any profession, in any industry, anything, and having someone that's been there, done that. It's kind of like that wisdom getting passed on. You can go grind through it and cut your teeth, or listen and take advice from someone that's done it. And on the personal side, I see it all the time. You can just remove roadblocks and prevent mistakes and avoid costly mistakes. And I imagine, is that similar on the business side, being able to help steer the business owners away from some costly mistakes that you've seen happen with other areas? Is that?
That's exactly it. And it's very much being able to ask the questions that shine a light on where things are going. And a couple of examples come to mind. So one is trying to push kind of the EOS system out to the rest of the company too quickly. So I've seen that happen where if you're not fully mastered the standard, the basic set of tools, and then you try to get other people to do it, then you cause confusion. I've seen that be one situation, but I've also seen it go the other way where the leadership team is great, they're using these tools, but they have not rolled it out to the rest of the company, and they're frustrated they're not seeing what they want out of it. And so that's where I've found that it's no right solution for different companies. It's just making sure that they're asking themselves the right question. And in another case, sometimes you get a situation where a company wants to be totally transparent with everything, revenue, profit, all the rest of it. And that can be great, and just talking about what are the potential outcomes of being really transparent in that. And other times, we don't want to be quite so transparent. We want to make sure that maybe some of the financial numbers are more kept at the leadership team level, and what they really want to share with the rest of the company are their goals around the product or the market, that kind of thing. And both can work equally well, but it's often just going a little bit further, and I've seen some companies where maybe they've taken one approach and it's not gone the way they'd wanted it to. And so have those questions with them and say, here's what I've seen, both good and bad. What kind of company do you think you are? Because if you're this kind of company, just know that these are some of the consequences of maybe pushing this up too quickly or not going quickly enough.
And what do you mean by this kind of company? Can you elaborate a bit more?
Yeah.
Because identity and understanding the framework of or inner workings of a company is important.
Yeah, exactly. So really understanding, I think, so maybe give you an example of a company that had gone through a lot of change. So really fast-moving tech company. Saying, you're used to things moving quickly, and your staff, your company is used to fast change. So that would suggest to me that you probably can move fairly quickly on this because people are used to change and they're used to new things coming in. The challenge you're probably going to see is having that staying power, because people that desire a lot of quick change often continue to desire quick change. And so you want to make sure that you're rolling it in a way it's going to be sustainable. And then other times, you've got a company maybe in a market that's been fairly stable for the last 20 years, and your staff has been very, very successful by being very stable. And if you try to push something out really quickly to them, you might find that you get a lot of resistance from it because, in a way, they've been rewarded for being really stable. And so in those kind of situations, you might want to make sure that there's a more structured, steady approach to it, because that's the kind of nature of the culture and the staff that you've got. And so no good or no best type of situation, but I think if you took a fast-moving company and tried to go really slow with them, and you probably wouldn't get what you want. If you took a very mature company and tried to go really quick with them, you might get a lot of pushback. And so those are the kind of questions that we run ourselves through and just understand, based on the kind of culture you've got, based on the kind of organization you want to build and how you want this to progress, we can just talk about the consequences of whether we move quickly or slowly. And it's all about what's right for them. And that's why I say there's no right answer. The whole idea is to help build that muscle to be able to think through these issues in a balanced kind of emotional and logical way. We call it healthy and smart, to make sure we're always looking at the issues from both that emotional perspective and that logical side of things, and making sure that we're taking that considered approach to it, because it's easy sometimes to look at, and I think about myself back in more of an engineering culture where every problem could be solved with an engineering solution. It's like most of the time that wasn't actually correct.
Yeah, add some more process.
That's right.
We'll get through this.
Process. But on the flip side, I've worked with companies that are very emotionally based, and sometimes they actually need a bit more discipline and logic in some of the approaches that they've got. And so it's just acknowledging reality in that company, but also looking to where they want to go. So that's where that vision part comes back in, and it's like, okay, this is where we're going. We've all agreed that this is our 10-year target, 3-year picture, 1-year plan. Are we all aligned on that? And that's where kind of that 90-day world comes in. Is about 90 days, people start to get a little bit disconnected from that. So we just need to get it back together, remind ourselves where we are, and continue that pulse moving forward.
Very exciting. So if someone's watching this and what you've shared really resonates with them, what are some of the questions they should be asking themselves, or actions they should be doing to help get them back on track?
Sure. Yeah, it's a great question. I always recommend, if people are curious about what EOS is, the book Traction is a great place to start. I find if you read the first couple of chapters on that, it'll either hit you, yeah, this is a great fit for us, or it won't. And I like to say that if it had been introduced to me about 5 years earlier, it's like, I don't need any of this. Like this is all pretty straightforward stuff. And yet when you get into where you actually really need it, all of a sudden it's like, oh, okay, this makes sense. I can see now why I've got some of these issues. And you asked about, where people would really go next. And I find typically if they're feeling frustrated with, say, lack of control in the business, challenges with their people or profit, maybe they've tried a lot of different things and they don't seem to be able to break through that ceiling. Those are the typical frustrations that we see. And in terms of where to go with it, just having an initial look through that book Traction, the EOSworldwide.com has a whole bunch of downloadable videos and tools. Really encourage people to explore a little bit through that. And if they've got any questions, I always have a complimentary meeting with them and just find out if it's something that can fit or not. It's something that I've really kind of come to learn about this is it only works if it feels like it's a right fit. It's not something you can force on anyone, even an entrepreneur who I talked to and they're super excited about it. It's like, yeah, we need to get this going right away. It's like, well, first thing we do is we meet with the leadership team and we lay it all out. Here's how it works. Because if they're not on board, and it happens a good amount of time, if they don't feel like it's right, you're not going to be able to push this through, Mr. or Mrs. Entrepreneur. And so it very much is a right time, right place. If it feels like it's right for them,
right fit.
then that's great. And when we move forward, and sometimes we have that initial at a company that I talked to over a year ago, felt like it was right, just not the right time. And a year later, got started again because it felt like now is the right time for them. So it's no single size fits all. But definitely the places that I tend to advise people to look first is take a look at the book Traction. If it feels like a fit, that's a great first start. And EOSworldwide.com has lots of videos and tools there that people can explore with. And then if they feel like they want to take a next step, there's a bunch of us, I think around 700 implementers around the globe right now.
Wow.
So there's likely somebody...
A lot of problems out there to solve.
Yeah, lots of problems, that's right. And we're all the same kind of core value fit. Is our core values are help first, do the right thing, make sure that we're helping before any expectation of a result. We're all from that background where we've lived the pain, so to speak. We've seen that there is light on the other side, and that's our passion, is to help entrepreneurial leadership teams get traction in their business. So any one of us are happy to have a conversation and find out if it's the right fit. And even sometimes it's the person who's going to be the right fit for you as an implementer. So my demeanor is kind of calm, relaxed. There's certain teams that really like that, and that's the kind of desire that they want. Others need a really high energy in your face. Somebody will really push them, and there's other implementers that are better for those teams. And so we really encourage people to make sure that EOS is the right system for them, and then B, if they want help with it, to make sure that they find the person who's going to be able to best suit their team and help them get what they want. And it's really a great community from that perspective, very abundance-minded. So we make sure that we want people to get what they want from their business, and if we can help them, then all the better for them and what they can do for their business. So that's our goal.
That makes a lot of sense. And your website as well has a lot of helpful tools on it. So I'll post that with the video so they can kind of have some tools, information there. And it's easy to just get in contact with you through your website link.
Yeah, absolutely.
If you want to have that 90-day or 90-minute...
90-minute meeting, that's right, absolutely. So I've got my LinkedIn address there or a phone number if people want to just reach out by email. Any of that is fine. It's always a quick conversation, find out if there's something that can help them. And if we take it from there, that's great. But if nothing else, I'd like to meet entrepreneurs, because they're the ones that really make things happen in the world. So that's an exciting place to be, is to be able to help them get what they want.
Well, it's an exciting place that you do too, like removing the roadblocks and solving the challenges so that people can live their journey and live their life. We need more and more people like you in the world to enable that. So thank you so much for sharing your story and solution with us today, Chris. I really appreciate it. Before we kind of end this episode, is there anything else you'd like to share with the audience?
I think you covered it. I appreciate it. Very well done, and happy to have conversations with anybody who's curious to learn more.
Wonderful. And we'll post your website link on this video, so anyone that's interested can reach out and have that connection with you.
Excellent. Thank you.
Well, this wraps up this episode of Unstoppable Journeys, discussing solutions to problems to help make your journey unstoppable. Thank you for joining, and have a great day.